Okay, good morning, everybody. I hope that you are having a great day or great morning so far, and that you survived the storms from yesterday. Um, at my house, our power went out. It's still out. So I was getting dressed in the dark this morning and managed to get myself together and make it here on time. But it's been an adventure. So today we're talking about normal teenage behavior versus what is more worrisome and something that as a parent that you should be more concerned about. Those of us, that are first-time parents of teenagers, a lot of times we can be like, oh gosh, is this normal? And even if it's like your second or third child that you've had go through the teenage years, kids can be so different that, you could have your second child act in a certain way that your first child didn't, and still wonder, is this normal? So I want to put the caveat with what we're going to talk about today in this presentation. I am not a child psychologist. I'm not an expert, but what I've done is with this presentation, we've put together advice from experts. So hopefully you find this helpful. So let me go ahead and share my screen. As always, if questions come up, you can put them in the chat. You can raise your hand. I think probably putting them in the chat might be the easiest. I'm gonna make sure I have my chat up because I'm going to be in presentation mode. I think I should still be able to see everything, hopefully. Let me use slideshow. Okay, so what is normal teenage behavior? And I don't know if hopefully it pops up if you have a question in the chat, but I may just be able to do questions at the end. So we'll get to them, don't worry. Okay, so what is normal teenage behavior and what is not? First off, I want to say, normal is relative. We have a definition of what normal is. It's conforming to a standard, usual, typical, what's expected. So normal is like when you're like looking at like your average teenager and how do they act, and that's what's normal. So of course, that's all relative. What was normal for us when we were in high school, and in 1990, I was a sophomore in high school. I graduated from high school in 1992 versus, I'm sorry, this presentation, we actually wrote it last year. So that should say 2023. So what was normal when we were in high school versus what's normal today? When I was in high school, certainly didn't have a cell phone. Cell phones were not a thing. And so that is something that our teenagers deal with on a daily basis that when we were all teenagers, we did not have to deal with. Also, we can't forget COVID and what our kids went through, especially, the teens. Some of our kids, like our seniors, they were in high school when we shut down. This week we had the 3-year anniversary of when everything shut down. So our seniors were still in high school, but most of our students were in middle school. And I've said this several times, but as a high school principal, I have a new respect for middle schools and what they do to prepare teenagers for high school. And so the fact that most of our kids that are in high school now, the year of distance learning and the year of like quarantine and shutting down and everything, that they were in middle school during that time. I think that that's actually a pretty significant thing that we are going to have to always keep in mind with our teenagers. And then of course, different teens have different personalities. So not every teenager is the same. There are certainly things that are trends and common, but every teen is different. And you may see that with your own kids. My 2 kids, very different. So this is Erik Erikson is a child psychologist, very famous one. And so he put together this graph of the stages of psychosocial development. And so you have infancy, early childhood, like preschool, school age, which is like elementary school, and then adolescence, which is what we're going to talk about today, young adulthood, which is probably like when they graduate from high school into the college age. Then you have middle adulthood and then maturity, which I like to think maybe I'm still in the middle adulthood, but I'm probably more getting into that upper level at this point. But what we're going to talk about today is the adolescence. And so if you notice on this chart, adolescence, it says identity versus role confusion. So let's talk about what that means. So identity versus role confusion, it's very typical for teenagers to be questioning who they are, what do they want to do with their life, and have a lot of confusion about this and not really be confident about how they feel. So the questions of who am I, what career do I want, what do I believe in, how should I dress today, who should I hang out with, those are all really typical where they're kind of like trying to find their place in the world. They're moving, like one thing that we see with teens is this starting to be much more independent. And a lot of these questions come with this, they're moving away from like what we've like sheltered them with as parents and kind of going out into their own world and kind of finding their place in that world and like who they want to be as an adult. This is the reason actually I love working with teenagers, because I love seeing them develop into who they're going to be as an adult. And when in a high school, when they come in as freshmen where they're still really kids, and then leave as seniors where they're adults, it's actually, a lot of people don't like teenagers. I love teenagers. I think it's like a really exciting time in child development, and to see that transformation over 4 years is why I do what I do, actually. So moving on. So what we're going to do in this is I'm going to like go through like different topics that parents tend to be concerned about, and we'll talk about what's typical and what is more possibly concerning. Okay, so our first topic that we're going to talk about is sleep. And I've got some quotes on here. I'm not going to read all of these slides. There's a lot of information on slides, and I will share out this presentation when they send out the video this afternoon. But one thing to keep in mind, like teenagers and how much they sleep, it is absolutely true that their biological clock and what they need to sleep is different compared to when they were children, and it's different to adults. The teenager body naturally wants to sleep. If we were just to let a teenager sleep at their own like body clock, they would go to bed around 1 a.m. and get up around 10 a.m. That, of course, is not how the world works. It's not fitting into school hours, though. The movement in California to change the school start time to 8:30 is actually a lot to do with this biological clock, and that, a lot of high schools in California, Piedmont Hills, also, where we were starting school at 7:20, that is not actually a good time for teenagers and how their biological clock works. And so that's why the state legislature came in and said we had to change it. We could have a whole debate on whether or not that was a good change and the problems that have come with it, and like, the good that's come out of it. I think it's too soon to tell. But the point is, it is normal for teenagers to want to stay up late and then sleep in late. That is total normal teenage behavior. Where sleep can be potentially concerning, if your teen is sleeping all day, they are isolating themselves from friends, they are repeating, like you really struggle to get them up for school, like on a constant basis, not that they just didn't get enough sleep last night, but it's kind of a constant thing. They're struggling with not being able to sleep. Like if they're not sleeping, that's concerning. If they need more than 11 hours a night, and 11 hours a night seems like a lot, but honestly, the teenage biological clock and just with their brain developed, they do need about 10 hours of sleep a night. But if they're getting more on a regular basis, not that they were sleep deprived and catching up, but on a regular basis, they're sleeping like 13, 14 hours, that's concerning. That a lot of times that can be a sign of depression. I don't want to get into like what it can be, but it can be a concerning thing that maybe you need to look into. Next topic that I want to cover is moodiness and irritability. It is normal for teens to get moody, frustrated, irritable, for them to just, fluctuations in moods. This is a period of transition. They have a lot of new hormones. They're going through, some of them are still going through puberty, especially your boys, because girls tend to go through puberty earlier, so that may be more middle school, but your boys, they're going through puberty in high school. That, just the stuff that's going on in their body, that can cause a lot of feelings, and a lot of it will come out as like moodiness and irritableness. Just be supportive, understanding, their moods can fluctuate very quickly. So they may be, irritable and moody, and give them a little bit of time, and then an hour later they're fine. So sometimes they just need a little bit of time. But where this can be concerning behavior, if their moodiness is constantly escalating, like they are never coming down, like, I said, where like in a little while their mood will be better. If that's not happening, if they seem unable to cope with normal settings without flying off the handle, especially if they're getting violent, that definitely, those are red flags, and you can't, don't ignore that. Definitely get help with that. So grades, let's talk about grades. It is normal for teenagers not to do schoolwork. It's frustrating for us as a parent. We want them to do their homework and to stay on top of all of their assignments, but it is normal for them not to. It is also normal for them to stress out about their grades, and to worry about tests, and worry about the impact that their grades will have in the future, especially when they get into high school, because that's where they really see, if I don't get these grades, I'm not going to get into college, and having that worry about that and that stress about that is normal. Where this becomes potentially concerning behavior is if teens are exhibiting true anxiety, not just stress, because there's a difference between stress and anxiety. But if they're exhibiting true anxiety about schoolwork, so if they're worried about their grades, but they can't force themselves to study, they're just shutting down and they can't do it, that's, something to worry about. If they're having a hard time sleeping because they're worried and stressed out so much about school, if they're unable to regulate their emotions about school, like they're just like starting to cry and like constantly like about schoolwork, those are some areas of concern. Also, sudden fluctuations in grades, like if you have a child that has always turned in all their work, all of it, like, doing, they've done everything that they were supposed to their whole life, and then all of a sudden they're not turning anything in. They're not caring about their grades. They're missing a large number of assignments, and that's a change. Then that's something to worry about. I guess conversely, that maybe but though it might be like a positive, but like if they were somebody that like always was missing work, and then all of a sudden they're doing all of that work and they're turning everything in, maybe that's a positive, but you might check in with them and see what's changed about their life, because teens don't tend to like make rapid turnarounds just like that, for better or worse. So you might just like, if all of a sudden they're doing things that they're supposed to be doing, like, find out why. Maybe it's a good thing, but that would definitely be something to have a conversation about. Motivation. So typical teenage behavior, it's easy to say, the lazy teenager, probably because they sleep way more than we do as adults. It's easy to assume that they would prefer to do nothing but sleep in, play video games, and have their parents do everything for them. That's not really true. Teenagers actually can be really motivated. They just don't tend to be motivated about the stuff that they don't care about. They haven't learned what we all know as adults, that like in our life, we have to do things that we don't necessarily want to do. We have to pay our bills. We have to we have a job, we have stuff we have to do for our job. And you may not want to do it, but you have to do it. With teens, they haven't quite figured that out. That can be still a struggle for them, on forcing themselves to do the stuff that they want to do. Where this becomes concerning, when the lack of motivation goes beyond the preferred activities. So if your kid has always hated math and they don't want to do their math homework and you have to force them to do it, that's normal. They don't want to do math. Math is not fun for them. Forcing them to do something that's not fun for them, that is totally normal behavior. But if it's something that they've really loved and they're not motivated to do it, like they're really into video games, that's something they love to do and they love to spend their time doing it. And then now they're not wanting to do something that they've loved. That's when you should worry. That's problematic behavior, because teens should still want to do the things that they love to do. But the stuff that they're not into, it's totally normal that they're not motivated to do it. And unfortunately, sometimes they're not motivated by anything with school, and that sucks for us as parents. And that's just like, okay, struggling through and like figuring out like, all right, how are we going to get through high school the easiest way that we can get through? So withdrawal and isolation. So typical teen behavior with this topic: spending time alone in their room. That's normal behavior. Was a little like, are they actually alone? Not that they're sneaking somebody in their house, but realize that especially with social media today and their phones, and this is one of those areas that's so different from when we ourselves were teenagers, because we didn't have the cell phones and social media. So we would hang out with our friends. I would spend hours with my friends, like locked in my bedroom, and like my mom would get so annoyed. Teens tend now not to do that, but if they're on their phone, they may be just, in a virtual world with their friends. Giving one-word answers. My son is amazing at this. Just, how are you? I'm fine. He won't even say I'm fine. Fine. They tend to talk to people besides you, like where they'll say like, oh yeah, they're totally engaged and they talk and like, oh, but they're like, and you're like, they never talk to me. That's totally normal. They don't necessarily want to talk to their parents, wanting to do things on their own and not doing things with the family. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine the other night, and I was talking about, we just took a family trip to Hawaii this past Christmas, and my son, God love him, didn't want to do anything with the family, did not want to go to the beach, didn't want to go to the pool. He wanted to stay in the room and play video games the whole time. And I'm like, well, you could have done this at home, and we're in this beautiful place and spending a lot of money on this vacation. You don't want to do this. And my friend was sharing with me that when she was 13, that her parents took the family on this trip to Europe. And it was like this big deal. And it was the first time her parents had ever been out of the country. And like, it was really special to them. And she's like, and I just look back at that and I didn't want to do anything with my parents. Didn't want to like spend any time, didn't want to like go see things, didn't want to do anything. And I was miserable. And I look back at that and I was like, oh my gosh, I was such a pain. But so that type of thing, that's normal teen behavior, that they don't want to do things with the family. Again, kind of like the motivation, if they're not wanting to hang out with their friends, if they're not wanting to do things that they do enjoy, that's when it's potentially concerning. So let's talk a little bit about defiance. Teens will be defiant. They will backtalk. They will, give you some sass. That is normal and actually healthy behavior, because that's where they're testing. Why it's healthy is they're testing the boundaries. They're testing their independence, and they're seeing what they can get away with. That is totally normal. So wanting to push back against your rules as a parent, periodically getting in trouble at school. I would not say major trouble, but, little trouble, like they've got their cell phone out, like, and that's kind of a constant thing. And like teachers complain about that. That's very common, very normal. Can be a bigger issue when they are exhibiting more extreme rebellious behavior, like they're breaking the law. Like now you've got the police involved. That's more concerning. They're getting like frequently suspended from school. Mr. Campbell is like, his phone number by heart because he's calling. And the advisors, who they are and like they're calling you. Then that can be potentially more concerning. If their defiance is threatening to impact their future, then it's time to get some outside help, like they're getting in trouble with the law and like that sort of thing, then that's definitely more concerning. Is it like the end of the world that they've like ruined their life and they're never going to be able to recover from screwing up as a teenager? No. That's it. It's, so, but it is something that you definitely don't want to ignore. In the same vein, talking about alcohol and, experimenting with drugs and that sort of thing. We don't like this as a parent, but it is very common. Most kids will be in the position to at least experiment with alcohol prior to their 21st birthday. This is often true for marijuana. I would actually say in today's world, especially in California and the Bay Area, it's probably much more common that they're going to be exposed to marijuana, pot, than they are alcohol. It's prevalent. It's all over the place. So that's why it's important for you to talk to them about that. Talk to them about what you as a parent see as acceptable, and what's not acceptable. And, talk to your teen about peer pressure, as well as, the dangers of drug and alcohol. I think it's best to, as a parent, to accept this, that this is something that your teen is going to be exposed to, and to talk to them about it. And so, because if they think that you're going to, I think it's important to be open to your teens, and that they can come to you without you getting angry. Because if they think that if they come to you with stuff and you're just going to get so angry with them because, maybe they drank at a party or something like that, then they're not going to talk to you. And you want to have that relationship that they can come to you and talk to you. Like if they're in a potentially dangerous situation where they need you to come pick them up, they need to have that trust that you're going to do that, and not get angry with them. So I think that that's really important for us as parents. So that said, while some experimentation may be normal, it's obviously, this is a cause of concern if they're binge drinking, if they're turning to drugs and alcohol with like quite a lot of frequency, and or where they could be self-treating themselves for like anxiety and depression, where they're trying to self-medicate. That can be some worrisome, and like you just have to like have some conversations with them, and realize that I can tell you from my stuff with my daughter, I did not realize that she was doing some of the things that she was doing. So have those conversations, learn from my mistakes. Lying or withholding information. So it's not uncommon for teens to be somewhat secretive, and want privacy from their parents, that they're not going to tell you everything after I just told you to talk to them and try to get them to tell you everything. It's totally normal that they're not going to want to do that. They want to be able to make day-to-day decisions without your input, which is why they want to keep from, it's not that they're purposely, well, I guess maybe they are purposely, but they're trying to be independent. They're trying to break away from parents controlling every aspect of their life. And so they may withhold information. They may not tell you about the practices of their club meetings or things like that. It becomes a red flag when it develops into pathological lying, when they start lying to hide risky or dangerous behavior. That's when you need to start worrying. If you catch them in a lie that is like more serious, where they, are hiding stuff that's like really dangerous and like really worrisome, that's when you need to really address that. Lying about, yeah, I did my homework. That's normal. That's normal. You may not like it, but it's normal. I would also say stuff that especially stuff with school and grades and like, oh, the teacher didn't tell us about that assignment. Probably did. I just realized with stuff with school, there's probably two sides of the story. And so I'm not telling you that your kids are liars. I'm telling you that it's very common for teens to not tell the whole truth. Very, very common. Okay, sex and dating. So we talked a lot about this last week when we talked about how to talk about sex with your teen. So, sex is a part of growing up. It's a part of, it's definitely in high school, stuff that they're going to be hearing about, possibly doing, definitely stuff that their friends will be talking about. What I think is really important, we had the whole conversation about how to talk about sex with your child last week. So if you missed last week, go back and watch the YouTube video about that, because that's really important. But I think it's really important to have those conversations. I think it's really important to have a conversation about consent, both with your sons and daughters, no matter their gender, to talk about consent and talk about, giving permission and being okay, and not in being aware of like possible worrisome, aggressive sexual contact and things like that. Those are really important conversations to have. And one thing that we didn't touch on last week when we talked about this is pornography. I think that's an important thing to talk about with your teens also. This is a really awkward conversation. And so really uncomfortable conversation, but just with the internet and what's out there, like it's so prevalent and so easy to get to. Your teens have probably been exposed to it. And so having a conversation about what's normal sexual behavior and what's not, and because of what they could possibly be seeing out there on the internet, I think that that's a super uncomfortable conversation, but it's a really important conversation. Okay, so things to look for, things that are kind of like, just to sum up, like worrisome behavior that possibly are some red flags. Giving up, like not just being like, I don't want to do anything. Sleeping too much, too little, crying. Some crying is normal, but if it's kind of constant where they're constantly sad, that can be worrisome. Negative self-talk is worrisome, where they're always down on themselves. School avoidance, where they feel sick and they're too sick to go to school, and you're like, you're not actually sick. That's, worrisome. Changes in appetite, both if they're eating way more or they're eating way less. If they're worried about their safety, that's concerning. The intolerance of uncertainty, like that, this is an interesting one, because especially with COVID and like our world in the past 3 years, like we are all just like having to get used to uncertainty. But if they just cannot handle not knowing what's happening or what's going to happen, and the uncertainty of just life, if they seem to be like not able to cope with that, that's worrisome. Anger outbursts, again, like we talked about the moodiness, but if it's like violence where they're throwing things and hopefully not hitting you, but like if they're hitting people, like that's concerning. Withdrawing from activities they used to enjoy. Constantly expressing worries and complaining. A little bit is normal, but if it's constant, that can be worrisome. Excessive hostility or avoidance towards family. Again, a little bit of the avoidance of family, like I just said, like they don't always want to hang out with you. But if they're constantly doing it, like they just never come home, they never want to be around you, that could be worrisome. Fidgety, more than normal, like where they're constantly like that can actually be a sign of drug use. And a need for reassurance. That can be normal too. We all need reassurance, but if it's just like constant, that you're always kind of like needing to like be like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, that can be worrisome. So let's talk about what's not helpful. This is, as a parent with dealing with all this, what's not helpful for us to do. Removing all stressors and coddling, being the helicopter parent where you're removing all things that can cause any sort of stress and anxiety. That's actually the worst thing that we can do with as a parent. They need to learn to cope with life. And so we need, and that's a whole, like we talked about the gift of failure. You need to let them like struggle. So it's hard for us as parents, but it's really important. Assuming anxiety is manipulation, that they're just wanting to get out of something and like it's not genuine, because anxiety is a very real thing and it's very, very common amongst our teenagers. Getting angry with them, and sometimes that's hard for us as parents because, you know, especially when you're trying to get them to do their math homework and they don't want to, it's easy to snap and get angry. Give yourself 5 minutes, take a step back, breathe, and like come back, because you getting overly angry is not helpful. Telling others without their permission. So telling them what's going on, like other people, telling your friends and like what's going on without, teens can be very sensitive about sharing information about their life. I definitely have made this mistake. So, you know, ask before you're going to share information. One-upping them, you know, when like, oh, well, when I was in high school, I did this, or this is what happened to me, or like, you think you've got it bad, I've got this going on. That's not necessarily helpful. Minimizing their feelings, like, oh no, it's okay, you don't feel that bad, it's not that, you know, that's not that big of a deal. Reinforcing stuff that's going on, telling them to calm down. It's all kind of in the same vein. Like, it's all in your head, stop feeling sorry for yourself, don't worry, you'll be fine. That's invalidating their feelings. So it's the balancing act that we have to walk as a parent, where you want to validate their feelings, but you don't want to remove all those stressors. So yeah, I know this is really, really hard. Like, I'm here for you, talk to me about it, you know, but you got to get through this. Like, we have to, like, you know, you have to do this. So that's what's not helpful. Why is why not helpful? This is an interesting thing. So when they are like, I'm so stressed out, or I'm so worried, or I'm like, you know, when they're, especially with anxiety, we tend to ask why. We want to get to kind of the heart of the problem. So why tends to be the first question that we ask, but they may not know the answer. And so this can actually make them more anxious because they don't know why. And there may not be a why. And it makes them feel like they're disappointing you when they don't have an answer and they don't know why they're struggling. They definitely don't want to be a burden to you. I went through this with my daughter, and like she went through, you know, I've shared that, and I'm not oversharing because I have given her, she has given me permission to share this. I have talked to her about it, that I talk about her in these parent talks, and she has given me permission. But one thing that came out with all of my daughter's struggles is that she didn't want to be a burden. She felt that my husband and I were really busy, that we were really stressed about, you know, others, like our own lives and work and everything. And she didn't want to add something to our stress. And that was just really devastating as a parent to hear, because you don't want your kid to like think that they're a burden to you. So also, you know, they may feel like there must be something wrong with them, because, you know, why do they feel like this? Because they don't feel normal. The best thing that you can, like, when your kid's coming to you and talking to you about this, is asking them, do you want me to listen? Do you want me to give you advice? Or do you want me to be upset with you? Because sometimes they do want to be upset. Sometimes teenagers, they want boundaries. You know, they fight against boundaries, but sometimes they want boundaries. And so they do actually want you to sometimes like be upset with them. And sometimes they want to just vent and they want you to listen. And sometimes they want advice. This is actually asking this is really like having this be like your question of like, Especially like, do you want me just to listen, or do you want me to give you advice? Like when you're talking to your spouse, when you're talking to somebody at work, when you're talking like anybody in your life, having this be like your go-to question before you really get into it is the best thing you can do. I actually said this question yesterday. I had a teacher come to me and she was really upset about stuff and I didn't know. And I was like, hey, do you want me just to listen or do you want advice? And she's like, I want advice. And I was like, okay, I've got some advice. So let's talk about that. But I wanted to like make sure, because, you know, if you just jump in with all of your advice and they just wanted somebody to listen, that's sometimes not helpful. Because you guys, I know, like sometimes I just want to vent and talk about stuff. And I know what I have to do. I don't need somebody to give me advice. I just want to talk. So how can we help? Modeling good, healthy coping strategies ourselves. Like how are we coping with our own stresses and our own anxiety? Modeling self-care. That's something in these parent talks that we talk a lot about, is modeling self-care. Very, very important. Encourage them, praise them, push them to avoid avoiding. So not, you know, not pushing off like the big project they have to do, or not avoiding conflict that may be coming. Like if they're avoiding asking their teacher for help, pushing them to ask their teacher for help, and getting them to do that. Because honestly, with anxiety, like I said, anxiety is something that is very common with our teenagers, but the best way to deal with anxiety is to push through the anxiety, which is very, very difficult, but that's what we got to do as parents, is to help them push through it. Try to understand what they're going through. Don't take it personally if they don't want to talk to you about it. You may not be the one that they want to talk to, but see if there's somebody else that they'll talk to. With my daughter, I have a very close family friend. My daughter told her all sorts of stuff that she didn't necessarily feel comfortable telling me. So having somebody they talk to, if they need therapy, get them therapy. That's important. Monitor their sleep. How much sleep are they getting? Are they not getting enough? Or are they getting too much? Like I said, 10 hours is normal. Sleeping in, not wanting to go to bed at night and sleeping in late is normal, but monitor how much sleep they're getting. Listen to them. Don't demand perfection. Provide healthy food. Try to get them to eat as healthy as possible. They're teenagers. They like to eat junk food. So as much as you can, try to balance that with some healthy food. Encourage them to spend time with their friends, and realize that sometimes when they're doing that online gaming, they're talking to friends, and that is actually spending time with their friends. Especially if you have a more introverted, shy child, that may be spending time with their friends. So don't discount that. Praise their effort. Talk to their doctor. Any concerns that you have, they go to they're still going to a pediatrician. Talk to the pediatrician about stuff that you're concerned about, because a lot of times there's resources that they can provide for you that you may not know about, that can be really helpful. And be open to that support that is offered to you. And if they need professional help, offer them professional help. Our social workers, they normally actually would be here to talk about this, but they have a district social work meeting today. But we have 2 social workers on site that can provide help. And if they need more, they can give resources for additional help. Okay, I think that's actually the end of our presentation. So I'm going to exit the slideshow. Go back. Hopefully that was helpful. Hold on, I need to find, stop sharing. Nothing in the chat. Do you guys have any questions? Anything that you thought of that came up when you were listening to that, or anything that you want to share, something that you've struggled with or that you've wondered is a normal teenage behavior? No, you guys are like, we got it. How do kids ask for help? Just walk in or need an appointment at school? It depends on who they're asking help from. If they want to see the counselor, we ask that they come during break and lunch and not during school time. If they need a longer, so that's for the counselors. If they need help from their teacher, It depends on the question and how much help that they need. So if it's just a quick question, I would say, yeah, raise your hand, ask the teacher, or like go up, if they're at the desk and you can go up, ask quietly. If sometimes kids that struggle with this are really, really shy. And so maybe they wait to, maybe they want to wait until the end of the period and ask when they can get additional help. And oftentimes the teacher will like say, okay, come in at break or come in at lunch, or I've got time after school. So if they need more help, I'd say like talking to the teacher, because every teacher has a different schedule, and they'll let them know when they're available. Every teacher is going to be available, I promise. And so they may, some teens may like just that idea of like going up and like actually talking to their teacher and like asking for that is like mortifying to them. So encourage them to send an email. Say, hey, I need extra help with this. When can I talk to you? And so you may, as the parent, may have to help them write that email. And that's okay. But the email should come from them. You may like sit down with them and help them write it. I still, as a parent, my daughter will like send me, when she has to like send an email to somebody, she'll like send me a draft and be like, does this look okay? And I'll be like, yeah, it looks good. So that's totally fine, but it should definitely come from them. Can parents meet with the counselor along with their child? Yes, but you will need an appointment for that. So with parent meetings, they don't want, because oftentimes the counselors are busy like doing like stuff. They're not just in their office waiting for people to drop in to talk. So if you want to meet with your child, email the counselor and ask for an appointment time. And then yes, you absolutely can. How does the parent reach out to the counselor for guidance? Email. And so let me show you where you find their email addresses. Hold on, I'm going to share my screen again. This, by the way, is my list before I move on. Topics that are coming up. Today is the 15th. So we're talking about what is normal with adolescent behavior. Next week, we're going to talk about raising an independent and self-confident teen. So give some advice on that. Hold on, can't see my tabs. This is our website. And so if you look over here in the counseling tab, click on that. Then you can scroll down and you will see all of our counselors here on the right side. When it says letters A through D, those are the last names of the students. And so that will tell you who your child's counselor is. And then their email address is on there, and then their phone number too. Most times, for most of us, I mean, you can call, but most of us prefer email. It's just easier. But you see both their phone numbers and their email addresses are on there. And so that's how you can get a hold of the counselor. Of course. Any other questions? Also, actually, let me go back to the website. Hold on. Share my screen again. Because that's for academic counseling. Let's see, where do we find also on here some other resources? Okay, so if you just want to, hopefully I've shown this to you, but just in case, the contact list, this is the contact information of pretty much everybody. Like you have your administrators, email. Again, most of us prefer email. Myself, definitely email me. I'm terrible with the phone and returning voicemails. But email, I'm a lot better. So here are the emails of all of the assistant principals and all the different areas of school that you might need help with. The counselors are here also. And then if it's a mental health concern that you're worried about, here is how the contact information for our social workers. Okay. They also divide by alpha, though they either one will help you, but that's how you get that. And again, where that was, so here's our homepage of our, like on my tabs, I always have a million tabs open. Our homepage, scroll down here. This was the contact And then we just updated this. This was out of date. I just fixed it the other day, but here is the contact information for all the teachers and all of their email addresses. You can't get a hold of teachers by phone, but you can email them. Okay. See, I helped that. Grace, I answered your question before you even asked it. That's the contact information for the mental health and where you find it. Academic counselors are different than mental health. So anybody's going to help you. If you have a question and like they aren't the person to help you, they will direct you to the right person. But academic counselors are going to help like with any sort of struggles that, questions you might have about the classes they're taking. If you're having a problem, if they're struggling in a class, they can help you with resources and that sort of thing. And then they also, any questions you have about the college application process and like anything with college goes to the academic counselor. Mental health would be the social workers. So if you are worried about their anxiety, if you're worried about depression, any of those, that presentation we did today, a lot of those red flags, any sort of that actually is probably the social workers would be the ones to help you. Do you need an appointment for the social worker? Yes, you do. Actually, you're probably, for a parent to see anybody at school, please have an appointment. Don't just like drop in. A lot of parents, I know they want it because like, oh, I have time now, so I can drop in, but we may not have time. We're actually, for compared to other high schools, we're very few administrators, not a lot of counselors. And so everybody's just really busy. And so when you make an appointment, they're looking at their calendar and like, this is when I had time for you. And they're going to devote that time for you. When like somebody makes an appointment with me, I set aside at least a half hour to an hour of time that I can devote to you, as opposed if you just drop in, maybe I've got 2 minutes because I'm on my way running to a meeting. So that's why we ask that you have an appointment. Can students just go talk to a social worker if they feel a need at school? No, they need an appointment with a social worker. But what they can do is they can drop into the wellness center. So the wellness center is open if they just need, like they're super stressed out and they just need a breather. That's why we have the wellness center open, that's someplace that they can go. There are people in there, but if it's like something that's like a more in-depth problem, again, we want an appointment and the social worker. So if you email the social workers, they will set up a time to meet with the child, and they will like send them a pass and like set up a time, because again, that's a much longer conversation and they may have like appointments set up throughout the day, which is why you can't just drop in and see them, because they've got other students they're seeing, if that makes sense. What is ideally the wellness center is open every day during the school day. So from like 8:30 to 3:30 is when the wellness center is open. Unfortunately, sometimes, especially now, because, with COVID, like everybody's very good about like, oh, I feel sick. And so I'm not going to come into school, with just like the possibility of like, oh, I might have COVID. And like, so sometimes people are out and we have to shut down the wellness center. That is something that we're hoping to avoid. One thing that parents can do that we're asking for, I keep sending the information out about the LCAP meetings and stuff that we need in the LCAP meetings. One thing that I would really like to see the district do, this is just me doing a plea and like, hey, if parents help us out, I would love to have the district hire somebody that's just in the wellness center and like that's their job, is to like facilitate the wellness center and run the wellness center so that it's always open. That's not our reality right now. We're dependent on like splitting it up and like somebody's in, because there has to be an adult in there. So it's open most days. Just occasionally it's not, which is not great, but it's open today. It's open right now. Okay. What is the counselor's interaction with all the students other than the ones that escalate issues? So the counselors meet with all of the students several times a year. Oftentimes it's in like bigger groups. So they will go into like, say, the freshman English classes, like in the fall, and then they come back in the spring. So they will do like presentations to like, not like all of the freshmen all at once, but like their English class. So it's like maybe 30 of them. But then they go into all the freshman English or like all of the sophomore world history classes. So they do that, like where they do classroom presentations about stuff that at different grade levels that they need to know. They do that twice a year, in the fall and in the spring. In the spring, actually more like the winter, because they did it starting in January. They just finished up with it. They met one-on-one with each student to talk about the classes that they will take next year. So they just finished that up. So actually ask your student, if they haven't come home and talked to you about it, ask them how their one-on-one with their counselor went and what classes they signed up for, because that happened before the February break. So, you know, that's something that they automatically do. So they, like the counseling presentations, they target to where the kid is in high school and what they need to be worried about at that time. So, you know, in the lower grades, it's more focused on like, hey, this is what you need to take in order to graduate from high school. This is like graduation requirements. These are the requirements to get into college, because they need to be thinking about that the whole time. As they get into the upper grades, they start talking about like stuff like right now they're talking to seniors about like, okay, graduation's coming up. This is what you're going to need to know for the end of the school year. That sort of stuff. For juniors right now, where they're starting to talk about like, okay, you're getting into the college application timeline and what's happening with that. Let me look real quick on my, because the counselors are actually coming to, where's my million tabs. The counselors are coming April 19th. So that's roughly a month from now. The counselors are going to come to this meeting. They will have a nighttime event for parents. And so after the nighttime events for parents, they always come to the Zoom with the principal the next day. So that means on April 18th, they'll have like a whole presentation to parents about the college application process. So if you are a parent of a junior, just know April 18th is when they're going to do their presentation, and then they'll come for any follow-up questions to this meeting the next morning. Hopefully, Sharad, that answered your question. Okay. All right. So our time is up. So thank you for all of your questions. Next week, we're going to talk about how to raise, that independent teenager and give them self-confidence. That was actually in the fall. I've had this post note on my desk for since probably, I think, September, because a parent in this meeting asked about, could we talk about developing self-confidence? And so I'm talking about it next week. That's our topic next week. So how do you raise that independent teenager and help them develop self-confidence? So I can finally throw this post-it note away, because it's been on my desk since September, to remember to make that a topic. Okay, so have a wonderful rest of your day. Hopefully my power comes back on, and hopefully yours all stay on. But thank you so much. Okay, bye.